Hey, Lana McAra here. I am trying something new, and it's kind of weird to me to be not in front of the camera today. I'm used to being in front of the camera. So today we're going to be going through this recipe that I absolutely love. It's called quick corn casserole. Super easy, super fast. It's unbelievably fast, and a family favorite. They love it because it tastes great, and I love it because it only takes a few minutes. So let's get started. This recipe is coming from my cookbook, Real Food on a Budget. It's available on Amazon, and this book has actually been around for about 15 years, but I've just revamped it, added a lot to it, and put it out again. So this recipe calls for biscuit mix, and if you have biscuit mix on hand, that's fine. You can just scoop out a cup, put it in here, but I don't have any biscuit mix. And at the bottom of the recipe is how to make a cup of biscuit mix if you don't have it. One of my family members said, I love this recipe, but I don't have biscuit mix all the time, and it's frustrating to me because I want to make it and I don't know how much. So I did some experimentation and I came up with how to make a cup of biscuit mix. So that's in the cookbook. So this is 10 tablespoons of flour, and I'm using gluten-free flour because my son is gluten intolerant, and so that's what I've started to use, but you can use regular flour too. That'll be fine. And then you're going to put in a teaspoon and a half of baking powder. These amounts are so incredibly small for a reason. And I have my trusty things here. Okay. Teaspoon and a half of baking powder. Some of this I've measured out previously, but not always. This recipe I found, wow, I think it's been more than 20 years ago, when we went to a dinner and somebody had this along, and they brought it, and I loved it so much that I tracked her down. So, teaspoon and a quarter of sugar. We put sugar in our biscuit mix because it helps it to brown. So it only takes a tiny bit, but if you leave it out, because some of us don't like sugar, which I was one of those people, the biscuits won't brown properly. So that's why we have it in there. And then we're just going to give that a little stir. And then we're just going to add in our shortening, which is 7 tablespoons of shortening. And because it's kind of an odd number, I pre-measured that here. It takes forever to try to figure that out. Okay, so then you just incorporate your flour into your shortening. And this is a crumble. This is the crumble topping, so that's why we want it to be crumbly. So we'll just do that, and it should come out to be about the same consistency as cornmeal. That's how I was always taught. And then once we get done with this, because it is a topping, we're going to add a little bit of butter to this as well. This recipe was from a Mennonite lady when we were overseas. That's kind of a funny story. There was a Mennonite compound there, missionaries there like we were, and they would have everybody over to their place for Thanksgiving dinner. And I'm talking about everybody that was American, because they had Thanksgiving there in Grenada, West Indies, but it was a different day. It was in October, and so they would invite us to come and have Thanksgiving dinner, and they raised turkeys, so we actually could have real turkey. So we were so delighted to go, and one of those ladies brought this with her, and wow, it was so amazing. She had brought her mother had come down to visit and brought her some corn, fresh corn on the cob, and wow, was it ever good. Okay, I'm gonna wash up my hands and I'll be right back. Okay, before I forget it, let me turn on the oven to 350. Okay, let's just clear this away a little bit. And this is my favorite part, actually, the blender. I love cooking with the blender. Excuse all the noise here. I love glass, and so glass gets a little bit loud. Okay, so we're going to put in a cup of evaporated milk into the blender. And then a tablespoon of sugar. I like to keep my things in mason jars. I love mason jars, the way they look. And an 1/8 teaspoon of pepper and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And then 2 tablespoons of flour. And then we're going to put in 2 eggs. All right. And then the one thing I haven't put in yet is the corn. So we're going to drain the corn, and this is actually how I drain corn. I just use the lid and I'm pouring it right into this cup that I had the milk in. Now I'm using canned corn because that's what I have, but this recipe is so versatile. If you have fresh corn that you have put in the freezer, that is perfect. That's wonderful. If you have fresh corn from the garden that you've cooked, it should be cooked, then that's great too. I also use frozen corn. Frozen corn works really good in this recipe. Just happen to have a can of corn here, so I'm using this whole kernel corn. Now the recipe calls for 2 cups. This is just shy of 2 cups, but I'm just going to use the can. I'm not going to worry about that extra little tablespoon or whatever. It's fine. If you're using the bigger recipe, this corn liquid comes in to the bigger recipe, but since I'm using the smaller one, I'm not going to need it. So what we do now, we've got everything in here but the corn. And so we're going to put this on the blender and get my lid here. Let's move it into the camera. Alrighty. And I'm going to put it, this one has to be turned on and then you hit pulse. I'm only going to hit pulse, so you don't do much. That's it. And then take off the lid and pour in about 90% of the corn. I usually keep a few kernels back. I don't put it all into the blender. Put in most of the corn and pulse it again. That's it. That's all you do. And then you put the rest of this in, the rest of the whole kernels in. You want some of them to be whole. You don't want them all to be all pulverized. And you just do it so little, so very little. Okay, and then you pour this into your pan. I'm going to hold it up here so that my camera can see. You just pour it into the pan and spread it out there. Okay, that's it. Now all you do is you take your topping and sprinkle it on top. Just like that. Now with this gluten-free flour, I'm finding that it's a little bit too soft. I would put in a little bit more flour because I'm not using regular all-purpose flour. You just have to kind of go with it because sometimes you have more humidity, less humidity. And so if your flour here, your biscuit mix doesn't, if it feels too wet, then go ahead and add a little more flour. Or if it feels too powdery, then add a little more shortening or butter. Okay, there we are. That's it. And I'm going to stick this in the oven and I'll be right back. Okay, timer's about to go off here and we're going to be looking at the corn casserole. There we go. It smells awesome, by the way. I've been smelling it now for a few minutes. Wow, isn't that great? And look, see the cracks on the top? That tells me that it's done. Okay, I'm going to turn off the oven. And set this out here to cool. for just a minute, and then we're going to give it a taste. Wow, amazing. Okay, let's give it a taste here. Just gonna set it there. It's still pretty warm, but I let it cool for a few minutes. I don't want to burn my tongue. Boy, is this ever good. See how cakey it looks? It looks really like cakey all the way through. Because it is so soupy at the beginning, so thin, you wouldn't think so, but it is just amazing. The flavor is awesome. It's a little bit sweet. It's got the corn flavor all the way through, and then a little bit of saltiness from the biscuit mix. Wow. This reminds me of Thanksgiving dinner. My kids always dive into this. Remember, I take this casserole to any kind of family gathering. I just want to keep eating. All right, thank you so much. See you next time.